Wah, 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 wah. Well, I'm talking about fantasy football, but I'm playing Minecraft while I'm talking about it. I'm talking about fantasy football, but I'm playing Minecraft while I'm talking about it. Talking about fantasy football, but I'm playing Minecraft while I'm talking about it. I'm talking about fantasy football, but I'm playing Minecraft while I'm talking about it. Hey. Hi again, and welcome in to fantasy football, but I'm playing Minecraft also. The best fantasy football show that also involves a person playing Minecraft continuously throughout the fantasy football show. I am yet again Nert Doobles. That is my pet cat, or one of them. This one actually matches my armor, which is extra cool. But I have a number of pet cats, and this is the Minecraft village, which I have decided to take over and inhabit. In case you've never been here on the show before, I'm not going to really talk about the Minecraft stuff I'm doing very much. This is really all about the fantasy football, and it's week 3 of the fantasy football season, and therefore the fantasy football season that has just concluded, or is in the process of concluding as I record this video. And the show's going to be about that. I'm doing 2 episodes a week. An episode that I aim to release on Tuesdays, which covers all the games that happened in the week before. I break down, whatever games I watched, as well as notes from games that I didn't get a chance to watch, but I did get a chance to. I will always do some research and at least watch the game highlights and stuff, in addition to watching some of the games. And I'll do an episode for Friday's release, which covers the Thursday night game, and that one will have some sit and start discussions of the upcoming weekend slate of games. Of course, this is the Tuesday episode, so I'm going to talk about the games in week 3, and we're going to conclude with a section on the waivers. I'm going to try to put chapter titles. There's a number of enhancements that I'm going to try to do to this. One of them is I'm going to put chapter titles so you can jump ahead to a certain game. You can jump ahead to the waiver section if that's all you're here for. I understand that. Nonetheless, I hope to, really provide as much value as possible. So I'm going to also continue to focus on continuous improvement of this, and hopefully it'll get better. And you'll get more value out of it. I hope you'll share some feedback, help me by letting me know what I can do to provide more value to you with this show. I'm gonna have to do a musical segment here, like eyeballs to the screen walls. That's not the song, but it's gonna have to be a real song about eyeballs to the screen walls. All right, welcome to Eyeballs to the Screen Walls. This is the part where I talk about the games that I watched, and we're going to start with the game that, unfortunately, because I live in the Denver area, my television loves playing, the Denver game. Well, not loves to. It's just like, it's part of how it works is like, it'll just play Denver games and often not a game, across from that Denver game. So that's pretty annoying in the sense that, I really want to watch other games that aren't Denver, like, Texans and Vikings, hello, and many other games that were on in the early window would have been preferable to watch than Broncos versus Buccaneers. But hey, first world problems and all, I watched the Broncos and the Buccaneers. And so I'm going to just talk in each of these segments about the game in general, but really try to focus it a little more on my takeaways rather than just on, telling you every single detail from the game. Let's begin by talking about the Denver Broncos. This is a team that, one of the teams that I would say, one of the stories of this week is don't underestimate these 0-2 teams just because, they've had issues so far this season, or they look like they're, not putting anything together. It's still very early in the season. Teams can turn it around, and the Broncos are a perfect example of this. This team is already getting slightly better and will continue, in my opinion, to get, slightly better as time goes on. It looks like they're really putting some things together, and obviously it looks like they're a well-coached team, which is very important. So let's talk about this Broncos offense and how I think it actually can have some value in fantasy this year. First of all, we got the Bo Nix, the quarterback, who early in the season it looked like, yeah, this is just bad news. Bad news Bears, so to speak. But not Bears. Bad news Broncos, I guess. But like in the sense of like, I think that movie where like at first they're a really dysfunctional team and they kind of suck. And it's only after like time that they kind of defy the odds and become good, I guess. I think that's how that movie works. But, sports movies are kind of like that in general. So, hello, polar bear. Okay, that's fine. I think Bo Nix, one of the things that is really, good about him and his play is that he really has that off script, threat. He provides that ability to do stuff that's outside of the plan, but, works really well for his team, keep plays alive, use his legs to get first downs, etc. He's still definitely not throwing well. Oh my God, I just realized this guy is still trapped up here, isn't he? Welcome back to the village. So Bo Nix actually seems like he can be part of a productive team, I feel like, with good coaching and with good weapons around him. In terms of the running back, I'm not in love with either of those players from a fantasy perspective, but Javonte Williams has slight value, and I think Jaleel McLaughlin has a similar amount of slight value, whatever that means. I really do think that these are guys who are going to be able to provide some value. I mean, McLaughlin looked slippery in this game. I'm saving up for when I can trade with these villagers. McLaughlin looked slippery, looked like he was gonna, he looks like he's got the talent to really do something for this team. Their offensive line was okay at run blocking this game and seemed to be doing particularly good at pass protection. So this is a situation where that might be, worth considering as a longer term buy. In other words, to buy into this offense actually getting something done. Cortland Sutton, of course, had numerous targets. They had a lot of more passing success than they've had in previous games. They're certainly looking like a team that you can consider as, this is a legit team that won't just roll over every week and get their butts kicked. What else do I say? Cortland Sutton, I almost wanted to say he was borderline droppable, but after watching more and more of this, oh crap, I keep doing that. More and more of this game and looking at the stats in the end, I mean, he actually was decent. He had a bunch of targets. I think they'll use the other receivers maybe a little too much to keep Sutton from being week by week valuable, but he's another example of somebody who will provide value for your team, I think longer term, later in the season, obviously. They had an impressive drive at the end of the first half. And it just looks in general like you can tell they're well coached and they will have some competence, especially if they can get the run game going. The defense was a big reason that they won this game. And I think that, stock up slightly on this team. Moving on to the Buccaneers. Yeah, this is a team that fell down to earth after a 2-0 start. The Broncos defense was good, but not necessarily like so transcendentally good that, that's the only reason that this team had a loss this week. It's looking like coverage. It's looking like good coverage and a decent pass rush is like potentially the kryptonite for Mayfield, because Mayfield relies on being able to gunsling a little bit, being able to move around, and being able to do the kinds of things that if there's good coverage downfield and he has to wait and like hold the ball and think about what he's doing for longer. Oh, I should probably open this house back up. That's, I think, potentially his and therefore this team's more generally kryptonite going forward. That's my sense of it, is that teams that can do that can keep the Buccaneers from having particularly productive games. You guys make babies. Oh, yeah. Those carrots aren't for you, kid. The carrots are for new kids on the block, or in this case, in the village. Anyway, where was I? So what else do we takeaways from this game? Mike Evans was shut down by Patrick Surtain. If you were brave enough to sit Mike Evans, despite his seemingly start every week kind of status, then good on you. You made the right decision. If you thought that, hey, this means that it's probably going to be a big game for Chris Godwin, and you started him, then good on you, because you also did the right thing in that situation. You too make babies before you get locked away in houses. And what else? the running back situation is important to look into. Rashad White definitely stock down, not because of anything he did wrong necessarily, but just because of Bucky Irving and everything that Bucky Irving did right. Which is not to say, Bucky Irving's perfect in any way. He's still a rookie. He did some good stuff. The line run blocking is not, it does leave something to desire, something to be desired or whatever. Bucky Irving had a little juice in the passing game too, that was a thing that I think it's worth keeping in mind, as that was not something that we could have necessarily, or that we did necessarily. But going into this week, the narrative was that Rashad White was the guy in the passing game, not Bucky Irving. But Bucky Irving was used in useful ways, and it seems like in general he's trending towards more than 50% of that backfield. But they used both of them in the same play a number of times. That's actually important to note. There was plays, a couple of them went to Bucky Irving, but Rashad White was also out there. I think it might be like the Jets and other teams that have two good running back options that can also catch passes, or at least one of the two can catch passes, that they're going to use them in formations to offer new forms of, deception and ways to confuse the defense and stuff. The receivers outside of Godwin didn't do much. There's nothing specifically to criticize, I guess, except the offensive line for giving up so many sacks. But I presume, looking back, some of them are actually coverage sacks, meaning it's a sack because the coverage held up long enough that the quarterback just had to hold on to the ball and didn't get enough done. But yeah, the Buccaneers overall had a solid. I'm not worried about their offensive weapons, but I don't think this team is what we kind of hoped it would be. It's not going to be this team that's a real contender. They're going to be middling, and Baker Mayfield also, as a fantasy quarterback, is going to have bad games like this, and and he'll probably have some more good games because of what he can do, and just because they do have the weapons and the tools. This was just a tough defense, and they couldn't rise to the occasion. Moving on, the next game that I watched with my actual eyeballs is the Cardinals and the Lions. This was actually, we didn't get the shootout. It was supposed to be a shootout. Everyone thought it was the highest over-under. It was like, this is going to be a shootout. We didn't really get that. Both teams put up a good amount of yards, but there was just not a lot of scoring, especially, I think, in the second half. I don't know how much scoring there was, but it was almost none, I think. Let's start with the Cardinals here. So takeaway, Marvin Harrison Jr. is, in fact, what you hoped for when you drafted him, which is to say he's the go-to guy. He's a great red zone target for this team. He's the one who's getting open, and Kyler Murray's finding him. The improvisational game, or at least the extending plays game, is those two are working it. Trey McBride has a great role, but he suffered a concussion in this game, apparently. I always assume players are going to miss at least 1 week with a concussion. That's not always the case. It's unfortunate. Obviously, anytime a player has a brain injury, that's an unfortunate part of football that at least I really, I feel terrible. I feel like it's one of the worst things about football. So that sucks. And we have to still talk about the fantasy implications of a potential absence, which in my mind are just Michael Wilson and or Greg Dortch has a little bit of a bump in terms of targets and opportunities. I'm not going to go after the backup tight end here. I think he had a catch in this game, but I'm not chasing after that per se. James Conner, he's not going to be elite at that level in matchups where the Cardinals can run freely and where the Cardinals want to use him in the passing game. That's fine. I'm fine with that. Go ahead and do that with your James Conner. Start him in those games, but I don't know. I still think he's just, he doesn't have as great of a ceiling or maybe as much of a floor. Well, he has some floor. He has floor. Sorry. James Conner has floor. No real takeaways that change his thing there, except recognizing that he can't be, and it probably won't be, a true, what do you call it? Elite kind of RB tier player. Moving to the Lions, they have two running backs who can be, I think, elite or close to elite tier running backs. Their run blocking is elite, and their offensive kind of approach is elite enough that they can control games with their run game. And so I think both Montgomery and Gibbs are probably elite options at the running back position overall. Amon-Ra St. Brown is just taking over for sure. This is, he's turning into what we hoped when we drafted him, especially if Sam Laporta, who it seems like has an injury from this game, make love and make babies. What are you doing? I can get some more beds too. I think, so Amon-Ra St. Brown, stock up. Sam Laporta definitely stock down, if we're being honest. It was not the best showing for him. Not the best situation in general going into the season. Not what we drafted him thinking we had. Where was I? Jameson Williams. Don't worry, he'll be all right. This might be a buy low, as they call it. I don't know. He has a boom bust profile, but I think he also has a floor now, and this is kind of his floor as a game like this. What's his name? Bates, the kicker. What's his first name? I don't remember. But Bates, the kicker, is somebody I would look at as a kicker. Obviously, you don't look at him as a receiver or something. But as a kicker, I think he might have some value this year. He missed an extra point, it should be noted, but just in general, he had a high-powered offense. I guess he's got a pretty good leg. I don't think anything's holding him back from some fantasy production this season. I think that's about it for those guys. So we're going to talk about the Vikings and the Texans. I had to watch this game, even if it wasn't on locally. I had to watch the replay of this game. I guess I will start with the Vikings, even though, this is good. I don't have much to say about the Texans, probably, so maybe I'll just start with the Texans, actually. I'm not at all worried about the main guys for the Texans. I think the pace of this team, the play calling overall, and obviously the talent, they're all there. It's not going anywhere. So buy low on CJ Stroud, trade for CJ Stroud if the person who has CJ Stroud is concerned, has another quarterback on their team. Maybe you have someone you can trade and throw in someone else to offset. I always like to do 2-for-1 trades because in shallow leagues there's always someone on the waivers that I just wish I had a bench spot for, and there's weekly speculative ads you can do on the waivers. So I'm all about upgrading my quarterback, for example, by trading a quarterback plus some other auxiliary roster piece for a better quarterback. I think CJ Stroud I think he's going to average 19 points per game this season, 20 maybe, but it's not bad. I mean, you're going to regularly get something in the 20s. I think there's a chance that this game we just saw is his worst fantasy game because he just has the tools. Not a lot of teams are going to hold these guys. Oh yeah, new kids on the block. Get it because it's Minecraft blocks. New kids on the blocks. Yeah, new kids on the blocks. That one's living inside his parents' skirt there, but I'm sure that. Yep, there it goes. Air horn sound. Nico Collins, wide receiver 1. A game like this is probably his floor. Luckily for you, Diggs, I think, is also a weekly starter, Stephon Diggs. So I'm happy with all those guys on my team. I'm afraid Tank Dell, on the other hand, is going to remain like he is now, getting less than 10 points most weeks. With that said, I think, he's going to still be a valuable player. I don't know. I have a hard time. I don't think he's going to have quite the same ceiling unless one of those other two receivers gets injured, at which point, of course, I do think he has all the ceiling in the world. And I think, at that point, he's a smash play. And I think, I don't know. My sense is that this Texans offense is going to be just fine. It's a mistake to worry at all. Certainly to worry a lot would be a mistake. I would be fine with all these guys on my team. I'm not in the slightest concerned. Kami Fairbairn missed a kick in this game, I believe, but I still think he's going to be just fine. I think what you want to do in general with this team is just hold the running back. If it's Akers, if Mixon continues to miss time, then I think Akers is a fine play. You're looking at a situation where if Mixon comes back sooner rather than later, he's just going to be a great every week start because they're not going to need to throw all the time. Their passing offense is potent enough to do what it needs to do. One last note, and I will emphasize I feel fairly strongly about this, buy low on the Texans defense. I really do think that the Texans defense is legitimate. This game, obviously, they gave up a bunch of points, and people might be down on it if they haven't watched the game. But if you watch the game, the Texans defense did a lot of good things. They were out there a ton, so they didn't. They had a hard time keeping the Vikings off the scoreboard, but that's not completely because they sucked or anything. They're good. They're still a good defense. I think they're a hold and possibly a season-long every week starter, or at least hold to if you're holding 2 defenses total. They did a lot of good things in this game. They really did. So they have pass protection, they have a pass rush, and they have a good secondary. So that's a formula for fantasy success. Don't worry at all about those guys. Feel good, about having them on your team or as your defense for this season. I would stick right with them. I would not worry about this game. If I had them on my team, I would not drop them. I would hold them. Even if they have a tough matchup or two, it depends. I think they have a tough matchup coming up, right? I don't remember. Moving right along, let's talk about the Vikings, because I definitely didn't forget to record this segment initially, and now I'm recording it later and acting like there's continuity. I definitely recorded this in the flow of the rest of this episode and not accidentally skipped it, and I'm doing it later with different clothing. This defense, man, oh man. Coming into the season, I would have said, hey, they're a good week 1 defense. I would have said, hey, they're a good streamer defense here and there. Even I, as a Vikings fan all my life, would not have held them probably for week 2 in a shallow league when there's so many other streaming options. Now, after week 3, when they finish with this Texans team, they are looking like a top 5 fantasy defense, season long. Hold them, start them every week against every opponent. They've proved that 2 weeks in a row that they can handle a good offensive team for the most part. So life comes at you fast. I underestimated this team. My own bias about the Vikings, having seen them for years and knowing this team coming into the season, I just didn't think they were going to be at this level. I didn't expect so many players to take the step forward that they did, and I didn't expect the veterans that came in to gel so well and to be so effective. They're awesome. Hang out with the Vikings defense all season and it will yield good things. As for their offense, that's also looking really good and really exciting for fans and for fantasy managers. Aaron Jones is serious about being serious. That man runs so hard. He's somebody that I'm just like, I wish I had drafted more. All these Vikings, including the defense, I wish I had drafted more. Justin Jefferson is serious about being the best pure receiver in the NFL and in his prime. Sam Darnold is unafraid to hang in the pocket, make throws downfield. He's serious about making serious throws and taking some serious risks, but also being smarter overall, than earlier in his career. The Texans brought a lot of pressure, and he did get sacked, but he didn't panic. He didn't make compounding mistakes after, getting sacked or getting pressured a lot. Man, awesome to see. Apparently, he has his knee bruise was after the game. His injury was later reported as he has a knee bruise, but nothing more serious than that. Jalen Naylor is definitely next up at the wide receiver position. If Addison's out for longer, I think Jalen Naylor is a fantasy prospect for real. Brandon Powell has skills. Don't sleep on him, but that's, deeper. Probably injuries in front of him is going to be required for him to have regular value. Yes, number one. Will Rica, number 1. Yeah. He may also be a good fantasy kicker all season. He got like a 50-something yard attempt, just barely put it through. I think he hit the crossbar and it bounced through. But they're building trust with him, and he's getting 50-plus yard attempts, even if, he still isn't, Brandon Aubrey or somebody hitting 60-yarders. But, man, Vikings, all signs point to, yay, the Vikings are actually good this year. Let's enjoy it while we can. As a Vikings fan, we're so used to getting hurt by this team. But let's hope this year they can keep it together and be a real contender. Their division is one of the toughest in football, it's feeling like, with the Packers, with the Lions, but I'm excited for them. So let's go. Let's go Vikings. I also watched the Bears and the Colts. why did I watch this game? Why did I think it was a good idea to watch this game? Yeah, so this game was not fun to watch. It was a pain in the eye, as you could say, a pain in the eyeball to watch. It had some interesting takeaways. For the Colts, Anthony Richardson, well, for fantasy at least, was butt cheeks this game. And the team still won the game, so think what you will of that. Yeah, they won the game. Richardson was not good as a passer. He looked bad as a passer. This just was, he kind of looked like somebody who you're nervous to start every week. A Jaden Daniels maybe is the equivalent, where he's still not putting it all together. He's still not a great passer. Here's hoping, I haven't seen the Monday night game. Here's hoping Jaden Daniels can continue getting better for the sake of my fantasy team and yours. But Richardson was just not looking like he's really ready as a passer. Everyone but Jonathan Taylor might be a problem for this offense in the sense that they're hard to predict. There's going to be a big week probably for Pittman eventually. There's going to be a big weeks for Pierce or Downs or even the tight end Kylan Granson maybe. But it's really Jonathan Taylor is the only, I think, solid element to this team, and that includes Anthony Richardson. I think he's going to be a lot more boom and bust than you hoped. He's going to have a rushing floor, but it's not such a floor that, with his passing deficiencies, it keeps him viable every week. He's going to have potentially another game or two like this where he scored like 4 fantasy points or something. Bad news. As for the Bears, there's still also a lot of ugly Caleb Williams plays in this game. It's still better, I guess. It couldn't be. I mean, it's got to be better than the first couple weeks, right? It's still better than that for whatever that's worth. I mean, I don't know what to say. He dodged some sacks. He did a really good job, getting open in situations where, getting open. I mean, he did good at getting himself out of the pocket in productive ways that kept plays alive. Really, actually amazing kinds of plays where he just used his not acrobatics, but he used his skill and his speed and his dexterity to get himself out of sacks, and that's really good stuff. I mean, there's no question that itself is, I don't know. You should consider that and take seriously. If I have a spot on my bench at this point, I'm hoping someone dropped Caleb Williams. I'd like to pick him back up and play him again this week, or not necessarily start him, but I'd like to pick up Caleb Williams at this point. It's a good chance someone dropped him. This game showed me what I needed to see. It's not like he's going to be great, but the value is going up, like I anticipated, like I think many people anticipated. We may see real value sooner rather than later with Caleb Williams. So I'm in on going ahead and getting Caleb Williams at this point. Oh, you still have your stupid job. I think this Bears offense is still going to be in growing pains mode for quite a while, but I think Caleb Williams has a growing value and will eventually, some weeks at least, be fantasy viable. I don't know if he's worth more than any number of other quarterbacks that could be on your waivers, like Geno Smith, for example, or Mayfield, or Goff, or whoever else, Stafford even. He may not be there regularly, but once they do start to unlock, hey, this guy is amazing at evading defenders, maybe we should use that to evade defenders towards the end zone instead of just backwards to get away from pressure, which bad offensive line. So that might it's still the cap of this team. I also blame the coaching for holding him back personally, but he can throw for over 300 yards on any given week, and he has a bunch of good pass catchers that he might be able to support for fantasy, even if he himself weirdly is a bit tenuous for fantasy as a starter. But clearly, DJ Moore is in an okay position here. He's getting a lot of targets, and eventually he's going to convert that into some more scoring. Rome Odunze, both those guys run really good routes, and they get open. So I expect them to continue to do good. When Keenan Allen comes back, if that's soon, it might be harder for all three of them to hold value. I still think Keenan Allen will be in a valuable role for this team with short passing work, and that they're going to want to go to him a lot. So I think, he has PPR value, but we'll have to wait and see if Odunze and Moore kind of continue to take up the oxygen here. And Cole Kmet took up a bunch of oxygen in this game. I think he had 10 catches on like 12 targets or something wild like that. And some of those catches look good. Cole Kmet has always been a decent receiver. It was just a matter of volume, and starting the season, it was like Gerald Everett is maybe more of the pass-catching guy over him. But I don't want to chase these points for Cole Kmet. I don't think he's going to be an every week tight end. But it's a bit like Tyler Conklin, where Tyler Conklin, I do think he's someone I do want to pick up. With both of those teams, there are a number of passing options in the pass game. I think Conklin has a slightly less convoluted path to targets, but both of those guys have a lot of competition for targets. But the reason I'm bringing this up is to say I think Cole Kmet you're chasing points, and he's not going to give you productive value all season, but I could be wrong about that. This could be the breakout game that shows that Cole Kmet is also going to be a viable part of this offense. This could be the game that shows that, what they're learning is that they can't do crap in the run game, so they might as well give Caleb Williams 30 or 40 pass attempts a game, and he throws for 300 yards on a regular basis, and Cole Kmet is also viable from fantasy. That might be what we're seeing here, because their run game definitely sucks. DeAndre Swift, no, and he's probably droppable in my opinion at this point, because Herbert and Roshan Johnson, Khalil Herbert, Roshan Johnson, also in that backfield, don't seem like they're much less, like they don't offer less to the team than Swift, I think. So I expect all three of them to be involved. I expect their offensive line sucking to stop their run game from being productive in general, and I expect them to continue to move away from it and move towards what will ultimately be the strength of their team, even if it's a bit awkward, which is Caleb Williams trying to throw a gajillion times and hopefully, having a modicum of success. The defense for the Bears, still legit, I think. In spite of all their offensive struggles, I think they're a perfectly fine defense, matchup dependent perhaps a little bit, but certainly startable, holdable, usable in fantasy. And that's it for the Bears. And I think that overall the team, I would say, is trending up, if slowly. It's time we go on a caving adventure. Yay, caving, fun, super fun. I got myself prepared here. I'm going to go do some caving and talk about the last two games on the Sunday slate that I watched. The Cowboys and the Ravens, followed by the Falcons and the Chiefs as the Sunday night game. We're going to start... Oh, do I have a bet? I do have a bet. Good. Starting with the Cowboys and the Ravens. Last week I said this is going to be a game that comes down to which of these two teams is, coming in, playing harder, playing angrier about the start of the season. And I think we got the answer pretty definitively that team, in this case, was and is the Baltimore Ravens. I'm going to talk about the Cowboys first. Takeaways from this game. Just like last week, this isn't a takeaway in the sense that it's not new, but just like last week, we started out with Rico Dowdle, and he looks like the guy in that backfield. And then, oh hi, are you still here from before? Maybe that's weird. At some point, then we saw later in the game Zeke Elliott be involved and do some things. So Dowdle is still the guy to have, but overall the situation is still, I would say, just messy enough that it kind of puts a damper on any enthusiasm you might have about Rico Dowdle at this point. It's just another year for the Cowboys to be a mid team. I'm sorry to say it. You might be a Cowboys fan, and I understand why you aren't giving up on this team yet, but I don't really think they're a real contender. I think they're luxury mid, meaning they make the playoffs, they even make some noise in the playoffs, but they don't ultimately do much of anything beyond win one playoff game. They certainly aren't, I think, a contender to make it to the Super Bowl, just based on other teams in the NFC. There's a chance, like for any team, there's a chance they go on a run and do it, but I don't know. Sorry, I just think they're a luxury mid kind of team. And in addition to their general midness, one of the things that I think is an interesting takeaway from the last couple games is that maybe their defense is just mid also. Maybe this is a team that does not have the world beater, defense that we kind of set out thinking they had, and instead is just going to be mid on the defensive side of the ball. Ouch. Look at all these guys falling from up there. So, yeah, I'm not super stoked about the Cowboys this year. CeeDee Lamb is, of course, going to be fine, and I think Jake Ferguson is also an every-week start, or at least nearly every week. You know, Jake Ferguson, I think, is the second most valuable player in that passing offense. I mean, Dak Prescott will have some value, I think, some of the time, but he's not somebody that I would, be super excited, be chasing after. Are these guys just spawning one at a time up there? Interesting. Dak's going to have good games. He can distribute the ball around to a lot of different receivers. And yeah, he'll have some games like this where he actually has good fantasy lines. It might be a little hard to predict, and it might be just generally speaking. I mean, the Cowboys are still a pass-first team, so I do think you could do a lot worse than Dak as your quarterback. But I'm not seeing anything that makes me think he's an every-week starter. I have a league where someone dropped him before this week, and I think that that's a situation where, yeah, that might be a premature drop. Yeah, he might be valuable enough to not, outright just say goodbye to on your team. But I do think, you're looking at a situation where he's not going to be an every week value for your fantasy team. He'll be a some of the time guy, I think, is basically what we're getting at. I don't know that you want to rely on, but you might still want to roster other pass catchers, but I don't think you want to rely on Brandon Cooks at this point. I think Cooks and Tolbert and Kevontae Turpin are all players that are going to get some work in this passing offense. I just don't know if their role will be big enough. But, at least, Cooks and probably even more so Tolbert do seem like they're players that you can run out there on a regular basis. They seem like players that you can run out there on an irregular basis, meaning they're not somebody I want to start regularly, but if I need somebody to cover for a bye week, I think you can do worse than them. Moving on to the Ravens. What can you say about Lamar Jackson other than that he is a master at the keeping plays alive, improvisational aspects of football? He always plays really good in those situations. I like what he's doing, and he's the best at that. There's numerous quarterbacks who maybe have the ability to run and have the ability to do other good things for your team besides just pass. But Lamar Jackson to me is the best at just getting out of the pocket, being a running quarterback in order to help the team sustain and develop drives. He's just the best at that skill set, I believe. Oh shit. Okay, well that's fine. I was going to do that soon anyway. I just wasn't quite ready. So yeah, Lamar to me is, the takeaway here is just that he is what you hoped as a fantasy player again this year, and that he, even in tough matchups against tough opponents, I think he's going to be the one who carries that team. And I don't know if you can ever say a player is more valuable against tough opponents, but I think he is absolutely more valuable than most quarterbacks against tough opponents, in the sense that even against a tough opponent, even especially perhaps against a tough opponent, he has the goods to have a good fantasy day for your team and to potentially carry his team in the real world and have carry your fantasy team at the same time. So not a big new thing to say there. That's something that's already I would say kind of already the take many people probably have on Lamar, and that's why you drafted him as high as you did. But if you did, I think you're happy to have an elite fantasy quarterback at this point. Derrick Henry had a big game. I've been kind of low on Derrick Henry. I've been saying for the last few weeks kind of all this I don't think it's sustainable. I will say this, he looked more explosive. He looked more like a really good, explosive, fast running back this week than he did the last couple of weeks. So, if that's what you're looking for, I mean, if you have him, that's the kind of thing I think you want to look for in general. And I think he delivered on that front. I feel better than I did recently about, his prospects for this. If he plays like he did in this game, he is more what you hope for when you drafted him, which is someone who also has explosiveness and not just an extremely high, likelihood of getting touchdowns on a regular basis. And I mean, that's what you hoped for, right? He even got a nice little screen pass here, which is another example of the kind of thing you'd hope for as a fantasy manager coming into the season, is that maybe they'll actually use Derrick Henry in the pass game, and then after the first few weeks, you're like, yeah, no, that's not that's not his role, and it's still not his role, I will say. But the fact they did use him for one little screen pass is kind of cool. It's at least like encouraging in the sense of like, oh, okay, this could work out. This could work out where not only does he get a lot of work and he's explosive, but occasionally they do, take advantage of the screen game, which is part of what the Ravens can do in general, and it benefits Derrick Henry. I would also say concomitantly, I would also say Justice Hill is a legit value still, I think, for your fantasy team. I'm looking at him as somebody who is a flex player, is a standalone value player on a regular basis, but especially in games where they really have to put up points. He's definitely matchup dependent in the kind of inverse of Derrick Henry to an extent. The idea being that Derrick Henry is most valuable when they don't have to, when they do have to pass, rather. Derrick Henry is the most valuable when they don't really have to pass a lot. But he still obviously has some value even when they do pass, as we saw this past week. I think Justice Hill is the opposite. He has the most value, obviously, when they don't get to run the ball and they have to put up points. He's out there a lot more, and he's just a good player. He's not bad. He's going to have value, I think, just due to his skill and talent and goodness as a player. I think this is a great opportunity to trade for Zay Flowers if the Zay Flowers manager is worried about Zay Flowers' output or lack thereof this game, looking at the box score thinking, oh, Zay Flowers is kind of what the take on Zay Flowers prior to this year is kind of, maybe you won't have enough work because it's not a high pass volume team. The take prior years is, Mark Andrews is still the number one guy here. I think that Zay Flowers is the number one guy here. By the dip here, he didn't have a great game. I think it's one of his, if not his worst game of the season here. He has a good floor. He has a good ceiling for your team. I suggest that you try to buy the dip, try to trade for Zay Flowers, and I think he's going to make your team better. I get that he's not going to be Rashee Rice. He's not going to be a true wide receiver 1. I think he's going to be a very legitimately valuable wide receiver 2 for fantasy teams for the rest of the year. So no stress here on that. I'm all about picking up the parts of this offense going forward, and Zay Flowers being one of the most important parts of this offense going forward. I do think I'm a little bit worried about Andrews, and definitely worried that we overreacted with Isaiah Likely. I'll take blame because I was one of the overreactors. I don't think either of those guys is going to be quite as productive as you hoped for when you drafted Andrews and/or spent, waiver priority on Andrews, on Likely. So that's not the best news for those guys, but overall I think the offense is solid. I'd be happy to have these guys on my team in general. The defense is solid and probably can be started in fantasy most weeks. There's a lot of talk coming into this game that the passing defense was a major, Achilles heel or problem for this team. Didn't seem like it in this game. They took on a good Cowboys team and they seemed to do pretty good. So, I would be okay with starting the defense in good matchups. And, I think that's it for that game. Moving on to the Sunday night football game. We had the Chiefs against the Falcons. This is a game that was, not very illuminating in my opinion. It was only illuminating in the sense that we got a sense that the Chiefs are who we thought they were. The Falcons are emerging still, but basically who we thought they were, at least as of last week. I thought the Falcons, showed that, they have some potential. They still have a ways to go. And that's kind of what you saw this week, is that they had some flashes, but they're still not a team that's competent quite enough to beat the Chiefs, even though they seem to have some pretty decent defense. Let me start with the Chiefs. So one of the big news, or not news, one of the big changes that we came into this week kind of wondering about and waiting to see. Hello. Oh, I'm pretty low on health, aren't I? I got to eat some food, don't I? Oh, here we are. Hello. Is Carson Steele, and whether Carson Steele would really be an RB1 for this team. And I think he proved he earned the role, in my opinion. He's not going to have the role in the passing game that Pacheco has. He's not going to have quite the level of effectiveness that Pacheco has. Keep in mind he's kind of a green player, meaning he's new to the league, or he still has a lot of development. He came in as kind of a fullback, so not exactly training, I guess you'd say, for the same role that that an Isaiah Pacheco exactly has. But I think he absolutely is going to be their early down running back. He's going to have he runs hard, and he has that ability to just really I don't know, put the pedal to the metal. I don't know what the right saying is here, but he has ability, and I'm excited if with a little bit of tempered excitement. He's not going to be Pacheco, but if I picked him up this week, I'm glad I picked him up. I think he's going to hold value for at least the next half of the season while Pacheco's out. So yeah, I'm stock up for Carson Steele. You could go for Samaje Perine because he is going to probably, more so than with Pacheco out there, he's going to exclusively probably get the passing down work, whereas with Pacheco out there, that would not be the case. Bam, die. There we go. I think Xavier Worthy is who we thought he was. He's still boom bust, but he's going to have some boom weeks. I think he had a couple touches that didn't quite convert in this game, but that could have, so definitely Worthy is kind of who we thought he was. I think nothing changes outlook-wise for Rashee Rice, for Travis Kelce, and for Patrick Mahomes. In the case of Kelce, that's not what you want to hear, that nothing changed. You want to hear that, oh yeah, he's had a great game and they're going to get him involved. And the narrative was that they were going to try to get him involved. I think the reality is that he's just not going to ever be what he was, and he's now living a different kind of fantasy life, and he's not going to be useful for us who are relegated to the fantasy football life as opposed to the, dating a pop star and being a world famous TV star. It was also like acting now also. So good for him, not so good for fantasy. Anything else to say about this Chiefs team? No, not really. Moving on to the Falcons. Let's give Darnell Mooney his props. He's been this guy. He's been a skilled player. I think in this team this year, we may be looking at something like Jacoby Myers last year for the Raiders, a player who is not the alpha receiver, but is going to really clean up in what ultimately will be a somewhat narrow target tree. I think that you will still have Ray McLeod being involved and probably having value as a once in a while. Oh, I see. As a once in a while starter, you still can throw Ray McLeod in your lineup. He'll have a few games, probably be boom bust as a general profile, but I get a sense that Darnell Mooney might be this kind of go-to guy, a bit like Jacoby Myers was last year, again, who just really can be valuable on a regular basis for your fantasy team. So I'm excited about that. I mean, don't overreact. It might not be a thing every week, but I do think Darnell Mooney is somebody you should be looking at as a player for your fantasy team that belongs on a team and not on the waivers more generally. So there's that to consider. Kyle Pitts only had a few catches. He almost had a touchdown. I'm still nervous about Pitts overall. I'm not happy if he's my only tight end on a team, on my main home league team where I do have Pitts. I went and picked up Isaiah Likely, although now I'm wondering if I'm going to switch that to Tyler Conklin or somebody like that. Probably will aim for Conklin, although I'm not sure if it's worth using a waiver spot. And, because if I don't get Conklin and I'm stuck with Likely as my backup, I think that's not the worst. I might still end up dropping Isaiah Likely for another tight end, though. I am genuinely worried that he's just going to be too hard to predict, and that the only way he holds real long-term value is if Mark Andrews is injured. And I don't like holding a player just as a handcuff, particularly if I had Mark Andrews on my team, that'd be different. But if I don't, then I don't want to just hold him just for the sake of hoping, for injury, which I don't ever like to do as a fantasy football player. Even if it helps your team, it's something I find hard to root for. Injury, that is. So I'm I don't know. I think that Pitts he showed though a little bit more what you hope for, which is 60 yards, or approximately. Like if you get 6 points, maybe he only had 50-something yards, but if you get 6 points, at least you're doing something. You know what I mean? At least you're... Okay, these guys are still coming for me, aren't they? Yeah, so I don't know. Kyle Pitts, to me, is like... I don't love starting him every week, but I think he will have value. I think he probably will ultimately be a top 12 tight end this season, and I'm hoping that there will be a couple boom weeks. I didn't look at one of the big narratives last week was that his first read share was extremely low, and his target share was generally low. So I'm still monitoring that situation. I'm not by any means excited about Kyle Pitts, but I haven't given up on him completely at this point. I think there's still, the potential for him to grow and get more points as the season goes on, as Kirk Cousins and this offense, get their sea legs under them, so to speak, or start to spread their wings, to make it a more appropriate falconry metaphor. Bijan Robinson is still Bijan Robinson. This was a lower game, but this is probably a flourish. This is probably his floor, or closer to his floor at least. So yeah, don't worry about Bijan here in any deeper way, and Drake London is really starting to look like the wide receiver one for this team in a way that hopefully is sustainable. So I'm guessing we'll see more of that going forward. What else to say about them? Algier is still doing the same things that he's done in the past. It's the role we thought he has, and he runs pretty decently. He passes eye tests, at least as a valuable, secondary runner for this team. So I'm still good. I'm still in on him. I mean, if you have him, you have him as kind of a bench guy to maybe fill in on a bye week for another player or something, or you have him for the contingent value of losing Bijan Robinson, or all the above. And I think he's still fine at being those things. So I wouldn't be worried. I'm not worried about Bijan. I'm not worried about Tyler Algier relative to where you have him, or at least, what value you think he has. He doesn't have more than that, but he doesn't have less than that either. And then I think that's all to say for this team. Cousins is not startable at this point in his fantasy career. He might be by the end of the season as the season goes on, but I'm not excited about ever starting him, I think, until he shows more mobility, a little more arm strength. Yeah, it's not the ideal situation for him right now from a fantasy perspective, but at least he's there to support some of his teammates that you have. Oh, hi. All right, moving on to the Monday night game. I just watched this game. It's later than my other, but whatever. Monday night game, Commanders and the Bengals. Another one of these big surprise upsets happens here. Spoiler alert. We got another upset. The Commanders, man, they showed out in this game. The Bengals were big favorites here, and the expectation was that they would come out 0-2, ready to take care of business and just, put the pedal to the metal. That was not how it went down. It was a close game. It was a back and forth, but man, the Commanders just took it to them. We're going to start with, hello. We're going to start with the Bengals, actually. I hate to keep making the same point, but I really feel like the Bengals are the AFC's version of the Cowboys. They are the luxury mid team. They're just mid, ultimately. But what that means for fantasy, in this context at least, is that they are a productive team that can move the ball up and down the field. It's not a bad thing to be mid from the perspective of fantasy. I'm just saying I don't think they're a real contender in the AFC. They look like the team. Burrow can pass well, and they're a team that's going to be able to move the ball. They're a team that's just basically going to be, I think, just okay, not great, but definitely they're a team that I think we can count on to do their part in the division. Oh, I'm out of shield. Hold on. Let me just go over here and regroup. I think Burrow's going to be good. Fine. I think he's going to be fine. I don't know that he's going to be great for fantasy, but he'll be okay. I think, obviously, Jamar Chase is going to be just fine, and T. Higgins is going to be just fine. Oh, I shouldn't have been doing that. Beyond that, though, I don't know. I'm not in love with any of the secondary players on this team. Nice. I get him to fight the a zombie here by accident. Not quite. Oh, crap. Oh, this is dangerous now. This has become officially dangerous. Oh, crap. Oh, God. I might die. Oh, I meant to put the bed down. I haven't done it yet. Ooh, okay. 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 That got very dangerous very quickly. Anyway, the Bengals lost a veteran O-lineman in this game, Trent Brown. I don't know how much of a difference that's going to make kind of for the team overall, but I think in general, it was almost nighttime too, apparently. In general, it seems like their pass protection is decent. Burrow's just going to throw TD passes this year, I think. Zach Moss is decent for sure. Chase Brown had a little bit of action in this game. I don't know how much that translates longer term. I need more torches. Duh. That's why I did that, isn't it? But I think Zach Moss is probably... Oh, crap. What the hell just happened? Oh, I see. You know, they're a team that's going to pass more in the red zone than some other teams, so... and I don't think they're going to use Zach Moss in the passing game as extensively as some of the other running backs out there. But he's still looking like he's probably a solid player going forward as your RB2 or 3 on your team. I mean, I would prefer to have him as an RB3 just the way I build teams, but... Again, looking like a good role, looking like, he's in the driver's seat still, even with Chase Brown having a decent game with some production. So stock up or at least neutral for Zach Moss there, depending on where you had him before this game. And, they still feel like they're not going to really be a contender in my mind, but, they're going to be perfectly decent for fantasy is kind of my take after this game. Moving over to the Commanders, man, did they really show something. This is a team that, this is exactly what you're hoping for if you started out the season with any of the Commanders players. Ooh, we got slimes. Hey-o, look at that. Found some slime areas. That is good news. Where do we start with the Commanders? This is now looking like a team that can really put up points. I mean, I'm excited just on that level. The pace, they run things fast. They do their best to, at least Jaden Daniels was like, he was like, to the coaches, like, come on, get the play in. Like, they want to go fast. They know that that's part of the advantage. Jaden Daniels just looks, he looked like he was having a lot of fun out there, which also says, he looks comfortable. He looks like he can, he looks like he can manage that team. I'm excited for them as a team going forward. I think this is a sign of good things to come. I'm not anointing them, contenders or anything yet. There's going to be some growing pains. But there's going to definitely... Oh, snap, Villager Head. There's going to also be, I think, some more of this fun success that we can get excited about. Certainly for Jaden Daniels, first and foremost, out of anybody. He still throws some wild, like deep balls that are just like... He's just throwing it up there, which is kind of crazy. But he's also effective enough with those sometimes that, as a fantasy manager, you're like, okay, bring it on. I'll take some weird, wild, missed opportunities. But he looked really good in the passing game. One of the things we wanted to see after the first couple weeks is basically him just like make better decisions, but also be able to throw accurately, like, mid-range passes. When you look at someone like Anthony Richardson, this week demonstrated, he kind of really still doesn't have the deep ball. He has the deep ball, but he still doesn't really have enough accuracy on intermediate stuff to really be very productive in in a pass first kind of game. And just, doesn't have the accuracy to support, his mid range receivers like the Michael Pittman. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is that Jaden Daniels showed in this game at least that he has what it takes to just be accurate enough to really sustain drives and give this team a chance to win, even if they're pass first in any given scenario. So that is exciting stuff. Yeah, if you have Jaden Daniels, you're excited. The upside here, I don't know how, it might be hard to trade for him now, but in my mind, at least, the upside here is like a more accurate Lamar Jackson, which is insane to say, but that's really what we're looking at here. This is not a situation to be taken lightly from a fantasy perspective. If he puts it together in the next, if he continues to trend up and put it together from here, this is a team that could be a contender sooner rather than later, even if they're not a contender this year. But it looks like they have the pieces, and the vibes just were good out there today, which is always really good to see, a team like play and really enjoy themselves and gel and everything. So good stuff for the Commanders so far, this season, but certainly in week 3, we saw them take a step forward, I think. Oh, spider. Great. Just like I planned it. What else to say about this team? I mean, the other weapons are here. They're Terry McLaurin, man, even without the touchdown at the end, he had the long bomb, and, he might still be a little boom bust. There's still that profile, but I'm really feeling like they're going to build that chemistry over time. It's a sign of good things to come, I believe, for this team, and for Terry McLaurin specifically. I don't know that he's ever going to be, a fantasy star like we hoped when we drafted him, but I think he will be more consistent than he has been. That this will be a situation where the team, that there's a few different pass catchers, but that Jaden Daniels ultimately will come to really rely on Terry McLaurin as his main man, which again, this is what we kind of hoped for coming into the season, but we didn't see it over the first few weeks. I'm ready to say that I think it's happening. So that's exciting. And, the other receivers here might have some weekly value. I think the biggest winner here in terms of someone you can actually start on your fantasy team is Zach Ertz. I think Ertz basically looks like, until Ben Sinnott starts like legitimately sharing, with him, in the sense that Sinnott's getting a lot of work, and like it's, maybe they're splitting half and half kind of the effective, passing opportunity. I don't know if that's going to happen this season at all, but it certainly doesn't seem like it's happening right now. It seems like Sinnott is in there a little, but not. It's really Zach Ertz, and it's his team. So I'm in on him. I think he's going to be, he's a valuable waiver tight end pickup, and I think he's going to be a valuable tight end, relatively speaking, every week. Brian Robinson Jr. looking good. Austin Eckler, you hate to see it. He gets a concussion in this game. Basically, the way I look at it, this is going forward. If Eckler's out, it does help Brian Robinson, although they'll probably still mix him in just as much with, I forgot the guy's name, but the guy who came in to kind of replace Eckler, or at least, to fill in. I wish they do more creative stuff with Brian Robinson. They do. I mean, he does get usage in the passing game, so I'm not saying it's all bad, but, it's really annoying. At some point, it gets old just seeing like a ton of 1-yard runs on first down, 2-yard runs on first down, because you do get a lot of that. But yeah, it's good news. It's good stuff. I mean, I'm excited for this team going forward. I think they're going to be a legit team, and certainly a legit fantasy team that you can rely on to get you some points. Yeah, Austin Seibert, whatever, he kicked like 7 field goals against the Giants. He only had 1 or maybe 2 in this game, but yeah, this is exactly what you want to see if you're the Washington Commanders fans, is a team that doesn't need to settle for field goals all the time, but that field goal kicker for that team may still have some value. So yeah, I just throw that out there that he's good. Ooh, I'm gonna have a song for this eventually. Secondhand brains. It's all of the other games. It's the part where I talk about the other games. I don't know, something like that. So I'm going to do these in no particular order, just the order I guess I have notes on them here. Starting with the Panthers and the Raiders. Starting with the Raiders. For the Raiders, this was, yikes. This was not what we wanted to see. A lot of people have the Raiders defense out there, me included. This idea that the Raiders, have this soft schedule this game, and then the next 2 games being this, this really soft schedule. It's pretty meaningless now, because that defense didn't look like it could stop anybody, and it didn't look like at all a fantasy asset. So that's a bummer, if you were counting on that. Yeah. Okay. The Raiders, man, Zamir White is someone I drafted. I bought the hype of the coach saying he's going to try to get him 20 carries this week. Well, none of that happened, but also just in general, this is like, I feel like Zamir White is droppable, and I'm going to unfortunately be dropping him. I don't know if it's unfortunate. It's probably fortunate, because it means I'll have someone better on my team. But unfortunately for his potential, it doesn't seem like this situation is really going to serve the running backs all too well. We're going to probably see, more productivity out of the passing game all season, and week in and week out. I don't know. I mean, I guess I actually finally am seeing the case for Madison, where I kept saying no, don't go for Madison, but I realize now that Madison is the preferred back when they're in passing situations and probably when they're playing from behind. And this is a team that's probably going to be playing from behind quite a bit this year. So I actually like Madison enough to maybe roster him, but not Zamir White. I don't know. They do have a soft schedule upcoming, even if it's, even if the defense is, that soft schedule doesn't mean much for the defense, it still could mean something, for these running backs. But again, if this was supposed to be a soft schedule game, but of course, got to give credit where credit's due. This Panthers team really showed up. Just to finish up on takeaways for the Raiders skill players, it's really Bowers and Adams. It's still going to be Bowers and Adams doing most of the work on this team, I think, all season long. Jacoby Myers is probably not going to have quite a big enough role to really do what we want from fantasy like we saw from him last year. It's probably just not that big of a role this year, I think. Everybody's coming after me now. Okay. Gardner Minshew, to me, doesn't seem startable. Maybe, if anything, Aiden O'Connell taking over the role at some point may actually be of slight benefit to Jacoby Myers specifically, but overall I'd prefer to really work with Bowers, Devontae Adams, and nobody else if I can help it on this team in general. But, honorable mention to Alexander Madison. I'm moving on to the Panthers. Man, this was not what anyone was looking... Well, I mean, people expected it. Some people were like, oh yeah, Dalton's going to take over and it's going to change things. But a lot of people were still out on this team having what it takes to really do anything. Wow, that's a lot of zombies. This was a great game. Dalton actually looked really sharp. I do expect that to diminish as the season goes on. I don't expect him to be that sharp all season, but I do expect this to be a team that, with Dalton can certainly compete more. Okay, I got to run. They can't run through water because they're not smart enough to, so... smacked you in the head. Oh, okay. What was I saying? Yeah, Andy Dalton looks sharp. I think it'll diminish as the season goes on. I think, if he goes against good coverage, I don't know that he's going to be able to sit there and pick it apart. This was a game where he went up against basically bad coverage. So, I don't think that this is a, repeatable every week. I think that there really are enough flaws on this Raiders defense that we saw in this game. It was just as much a matter of them being a bad defense as it was of a good offense, much more competent offense than we've seen, certainly for this Panthers team. Deontay Johnson, I hope you didn't drop him too soon. Yeah, man, with Andy Dalton, it's a whole different ballgame, that's for sure. So you can be excited about Deontay Johnson. I mean, I don't know that he's going to have games like this every week, but, obviously that's not a prerequisite to be valuable for your fantasy team. He just has to be relatively consistent, which I do think he will be. I think that's something we can expect from him going forward. He's just going to be decent. That's all I can really say. I don't think he's going to be a star, but I do think he's going to be pretty darn decent. I think some teams will shut down the passing attack, but they will be playing from behind too, because they're not necessarily a contender just because Andy Dalton had one good game. Chuba Hubbard looking sharp. I don't know if this is stock up or stock down on Jonathan Brooks. Stock up because the team looks better, stock down because Chuba Hubbard looks good enough to maintain a big role, even if Jonathan Brooks, and obviously they're going to probably bring Brooks on slowly too. So, yeah, lots to ponder there. But Chuba Hubbard definitely in the short term, in the immediate term, looking sharper with Andy Dalton, looking like he's, got the important role in this passing offense. And he's got the major role in the running offense also. It's not so much Miles Sanders. He's out there. He's not completely ignored out there, but he's not, a major component, I would say, at this point. I don't know the latest on Adam Thielen's injury, but maybe there's a slight bump. Maybe there's enough for a second receiver on this team. Maybe if Thielen is out for some period of games, it's Leggett who is the beneficiary. I don't know. And Tommy Tremble. Elite tight end 3. I don't know. He's tight end 2, probably not even a tight end 1, but you could throw him out there. Maybe he turns into a tight end 1 in this situation. I don't know. Moving on to the Packers and the Titans. All right. Well, this was a situation where we weren't sure if that Packers team from last week was going to be able to, do this kind of thing again. They look like they have a really solid defense, and I'm going to say it once Jordan Love comes back, I really do think this team is a legitimate contender. Their defense is for real. Jaden Reed is the top wide receiver for the Packers. That's what we saw here, and that's what you kind of went into this week expecting. It really does feel like he's going to be the guy this year. He was certainly the fantasy value for sure where he was drafted, and he's looking like he's the guy who's going to be the fantasy value for this team. The other receivers, once Jordan Love comes back, may have some value. I don't know if Christian Watson. It's kind of like Christian Watson for the touchdowns, Romeo Doubs for the PPR. If I had to really simplify my point of view, and I think probably a lot of people's point of view, although I don't know, I can't speak for other people. It's just my interpretation. And I don't think Dontavian Wicks is going to get enough work in any situation except as a DFS or a dart throw kind of play. But man, Malik Willis revenge game, that was real. This was definitely a game where they looked like, they were a competent team under Malik Willis, so that's pretty cool to see. You like to see teams succeed with backup quarterbacks that actually step up to the plate and perform well. At least I do. I like to see that. And I particularly think this team, surprisingly and a bit infuriatingly as a Vikings fan, is going to be good, and even obviously have won 2 games in a row with Malik Willis here. They're looking like a team that even if Jordan Love has to miss another game or 2, might just be just fine, So, that's like, whoa, I did not expect that coming into the season. Now I definitely see them as a contender. Josh Jacobs here had less than an ideal game in many ways. I'm not extremely surprised to see this. I was worried, or I kind of perceived this possibility with him from the outset, where he doesn't necessarily have the explosiveness of other top backs. It's it's kind of a volume. You're needing him to get volume to pay off in fantasy as like a top, couple round. Sorry, I can't do multiple things at once here. I'm not very good at that. But yeah, Jacobs was less effective. He barely showed up in the highlights. The only time he showed up in the highlights, actually, now that I think about it, was a highlight where basically, all he did in the highlight was basically fail a third down conversion, like near the end of the game. That was the only time I noticed him in the highlights. Emmanuel Wilson, the other running back, had a better showing this game. Looked like a more playable fantasy player for sure. And Emmanuel Wilson looked like the better running back in this game. I don't expect Josh Jacobs to lose all value, but I think you have to recognize that volume is the only way that it pays off on what people thought he was after week 1 and 2, and he's probably not going to get that volume because I don't think he's as effective as a back who would deserve that volume. Saquon Barkley being a great example of a back who is good enough to play, I believe, still very much in his prime and with a great offensive line. I think, with Jacobs, you're looking at somebody who is not going to give you 30 carries a game. Even if he wanted to, it's just not the way that team is going to use him going forward because they just have too many other weapons in the passing game. They're a creative play calling team, and just running it with Josh Jacobs is not going to get it done, especially against tougher opponents. I'm not stock down on Jacobs for sure. He's still going to be okay. I wouldn't try to get rid of him. You can maybe buy low if you actually disagree with me and you think Jacobs has longer term value. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with those guys. Moving on to the Titans. This is interesting. So Will Levis still has a ways to go. He has that dual threat, quarterback, extend plays, and I think he still can be a good player in this league and a good player for fantasy. I just don't see it happening, in the immediate term. It still seems like this team and the quarterback has a lot of growing to do. Did I just hear an arrow come flying by? But yeah, I'm not crying about having Calvin Ridley, even though he did not have a great game. I don't know if it means anything that DeAndre Hopkins kind of outshone him in this game, outscored him in fantasy, and was out-targeted him and stuff like that. I don't know. I don't know if that's meaningful or not. I definitely think we should consider it at least mildly meaningful that could be very dangerous because they could pop out of all these little crevices too. These little buggers. But yeah, I'm definitely. I mean, if I thought after 2 weeks that Calvin Ridley was the man and was going to have everything you wanted in this offense every time you wanted it, I don't feel that way anymore. That's for sure. It definitely feels more like a. I don't want to go near all those skeletons either. This is dangerous. But yeah, Hopkins might have the value here as a PPR receiver in this going forward for this season. That could be a thing. I mean, he looks like he just has the feel for the connection. You know, I think the commentators mentioned the feel or whatever that he displayed. And yeah, I don't know if it's just his veteran, his nature, not his nature, but his veteran, savvy and his experience and everything. But he just really looked like he is in control. And obviously that's going to create trust with Will Levis. So Hopkins is probably worth picking up off your waivers, at least in PPR leagues if he was ever dropped. That seems like a value. There's a bunch of other random, from the fantasy perspective, pass catchers in this offense. So I think they might hold down the potential for either Ridley or Hopkins to have huge boom seasons. Maybe they can still have boom weeks, obviously, but boom seasons, I'm not convinced. I'm going to go down here just for fun. Let's do it. But, yeah, that was Pollard, as long as Tyjae Spears is playing, which he did this week, and, he didn't look bad when he got carries and stuff. I'm out on Pollard and Spears, but certainly, Spears cuts into Pollard's ability to really have big fantasy weeks for your team, I think. This is a wildly extensive cavern system. I think that's it for the Titans. Moving on to the Giants versus the Browns. This was actually another surprise. The Browns were significant favorites, but the Giants showed that they mean business. They're here to compete. One of the lessons of this week, I think, is don't underestimate those 0-2 teams. They will show up and they will compete, and they will, they may not be, the stars of the belle of the ball, but they're still here to, the NFL. It's the NFL. There's a lot of parity between teams. Even bad teams are good enough to beat you any given week. So the Giants show that this week, and of course the Browns are arguably a bad team also, which contributed to the situation. But we saw this week, that this Giants team it can put some things together. Its defense took a step forward for sure. And the offense, man, I will admit I made a huge mistake here. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who did something like this, but I decided, this is not the way out, is it? I decided in my infinite wisdom that I was going to sit Malik Neighbors because of the tough matchup, and I thought they would key in on him and just try to stop him. I mean, that was my thought coming in general with Malik Neighbors is, man, aren't defenses just going to know that he's the number one weapon and just try to take him out? And that's probably what they want to do, but easier said than done. I sat Malik Neighbors on my bench and started Rashid Shaheed, who had a big 0 in this week's game against the Eagles. So joke's on me, but I will point out that this is Malik Neighbors is amazing. He's a really good player, and it's looking like he might have a really, really good fantasy season. So if you did draft him and you've been putting him in your lineups, unlike me, and actually, oh wait, is this the way back? This is the way back, isn't it? Yes, it is. Yay. Then good on you for doing that. And I think Neighbors has a lot of value. It looks like Wan'Dale Robinson, he may be a tiny bit boom bust. He's not going to be perfect, but it looks like he really does have significant weekly value, especially in obviously PPR leagues. He really is the big other target on this team, and I don't mean big physically. He's a smaller guy relative to wide receivers, but he's a big contributor to this team, and I think he will be a big factor in their passing game. And have big numbers of targets, when you think of it over the course of a season at least. So yeah, I'm actually, I think that's good stuff. I think Wan'Dale Robinson deserves rostering at the very least, and even in a half PPR, I think he can be better than some of the other players you might have a choice of putting towards the bottom of your bench in order to just start some weeks and cover bye weeks and be matchup specific. He definitely fits the bill for me as somebody who has value in that kind of a role. Oh, there's someone else coming for me. I gotta make sure no one else is gonna kill me. Great. But yeah, Wan'Dale Robinson has some value. Devin Singletary is looking like, he might be somebody who's gonna continue to have just game in, game out, consistent, a little boring, maybe not, certainly not the most exciting player on your teams, but someone who has some value. Yeah, I mean, Singletary really seems to be getting it done. He seems to be playing at a high level. What else? That's it for the Giants, I think. I'm not counting on Daniel Jones yet. I'm not counting on this team to, I'm not overreacting to this win, but I'm happy to see it. And I think Malik Neighbors' managers are the most happiest, just knowing that this might be a sustainable, massive role, sustainable for this team over time, and just a massive role for him going forward. So, yeah, moving on to the Browns. There's not a ton to say here, I guess. I say no thanks to the running backs on the Browns. Collectively, they're just not interested. And the wide receivers on the Browns, I'm still, it's still a challenging thing. Amari Cooper had this big bounce back game. He did a bunch. He scored a bunch. He looked decently good, but then he got hurt near the end. It looks like if he does miss the next game, in general, it looks like Jerry Jeudy is kind of the next best. Oh, there's a geode right overhead. Kind of the next best receiver to have. Diamonds. No, that's not diamonds. So yeah, I'm looking at Jerry Jeudy as someone who's probably going to have some value with Cooper, but is definitely the guy without Cooper that you probably want to start for this Browns team. If you want to start anyone from this Browns team, Deshaun Watson is still not performing at the level that his contract would suggest he should be performing at. And excuse me, sir. Yeah, I just don't. This team is not not what I thought coming into this week. They might come out and try to prove they were, which is a meaningful, at least division contender, if not a real. I mean, being a division contender implies that you're a playoff team, but I don't see that now. I don't see the Browns at all as a playoff team. Actually, I think the Bengals have a better chance of making the playoffs than the Browns, despite their 0-3 start. That might be, maybe statistics will say that that's the wrong take for me to have, but that's just where my heart and my intuition tells me the Browns are at, which is to say, not anywhere useful or good or fantasy relevant right now. Yeah. I will note that the Browns have a softish schedule coming up, so you may want to consider that. There may be certainly some value in the running backs because of that, and obviously the wide receivers you work with accordingly. Moving on to the next game, I watched, or not watched, but saw the highlights of and read about, but you might have watched if you lived in certain parts of the country, which is the Steelers and the Chargers. This was the defensive battle we all expected, and not the most exciting game, it seems, from what I saw. It did not seem like it was a game that was, a real barn burner, a real fun one to watch per se, but, that's football. Some games are just like that. Let's start with the Steelers in this game. Just want to start by saying that I think the Steelers team was another team I still continue to underestimate a little. I don't think their 3-0 start means that they're a serious contender, but I do think it means that, people who didn't at least pay a little bit of attention to them initially were overlooking them and didn't take them seriously. I was one of those people, so I will admit and give credit where credit's due. Justin Fields looks like he's not generically, but he's genuinely, I should say, better than he was previously. He's really getting better, and I think he holds on to the starting job. They're not gonna sit him while they're still undefeated, that's for sure. So, he has at least that much reign until they lose a game at the very minimum where, maybe he is responsible for half of a game that they're losing, and then they bring in, Russell Wilson. But, yeah, I mean, credit where credit's due. He's better than he's been in the past, and obviously, which in and of itself is better than expected. So, got to say that for him. And, he's throwing some good passes. He's scrambling. He's not looking great, but he's looking acceptable for that team. I don't know what else to say. I wouldn't be starting him, but he certainly feels like a fantasy streamable quarterback in the right matchups. And I think most importantly is just that he has enough that he can keep other players viable in the passing game and in that offense in general. I think George Pickens is still a buy low after this week. He definitely, to me, feels like somebody who is still a valuable contributor to your fantasy team. Whoopsie daisy, I'm out of torches again. I think he'll be valuable for your fantasy team, and I think that you should try to trade for him right now before. Oh God, okay, I need to do more of this. Okay, you should trade for him now before he has another big game and people start to recognize that his value really is pretty high. That he's probably, I would argue, an every week starter. Maybe not wide receiver one, like a wide receiver one in the season, but no less than a wide receiver two. So therefore, highly valuable. Yes, the pass volume is low here, but I think he'll just be a startable weekly top 20 receiver every week. It's just how it is. Najee Harris, I'm still having a hard time getting excited about, but I will admit the case is there for him to just be a guy who is... that was the wrong move here. He'll be a guy who is just productive enough to slot into your RB3 kind of spot. He's almost definitely a volume-based play, Najee is. Yeah, I made a mistake by dropping Chris Boswell. I thought, I wanted to put my money where my mouth is. I said Chase McLaughlin is a good kicker this week, and I ended up making the mistake of just like dropping other perfectly good kickers to make that move when, McLaughlin just was crap, and Boswell just looks like a better option at the kicker position. If I had to, narrow it down to just one, I would pick Boswell over McLaughlin going forward, although I think they both have value, obviously, going forward, it should be said. I do think McLaughlin's not going to be this bad every week. Just the Buccaneers are still a middle-of-the-road team, ultimately. I think Pat Freiermuth is a low-end tight end that you could play some weeks. It's a low-volume passing attack, but he is one of the top 2 to 3 targets in that attack. I think we're going to see more, Calvin Austin, and that's not completely, I think Calvin Austin being a thing is a thing. Boom. What else? The Steelers defense might even be matchup proof-ish. They got it going on. They really did. They really did have it going on. I don't know that they're matchup proof per se, because they're going to face teams that are just way better than them. Even though right now they're undefeated, I don't think that means they're an elite team in this league or anything like that. But is that a baby? No, that's an adult zombie. But I think you can roll with the Steelers defense most weeks. I think they're definitely a fantasy relevant, valuable defense. As for the Chargers, stock down. I thought they were going to be the team to take control of this game. I thought it was going to go the opposite of how it did go in terms of which team would really have control of things. That didn't happen, obviously, but I'm not out completely on this Chargers team. But stock, slightly down for, for J.K. Dobbins. I don't think that the issues in this loss were his fault, but, I don't think that, he has the vision. He's a good player, but he's not a dominant elite running back probably. So not necessarily stock down, just, that's what this game, the takeaway here is that J.K. Dobbins is going to be good, but he's still, like any other player, going to have difficulty in some matchups, in some game scripts. This was apparently one. But I think this was more of a floor. Like, this is his floor probably, or near his floor. This is a floor kind of game for him. Ooh, nice shot. I think Quentin Johnston proved that he is the most valuable receiver on this team. I know he only had a couple targets, but he had the touchdown, and just the nature of his targets are valuable, I think. And, I see Quentin Johnston as somebody who you can still kind of, like, the people haven't really, after this game, it's not like you got the pure confirmation that, this guy is going to be awesome to have. So, if people don't pick him up on the waivers or they drop him again, or you can trade for him before he really blows up, I think there's still some value there. I think Ladd McConkey has some value as a PPR player, but I'm not chasing after that. I think, he might just, as a rookie, have a middle of the road season. I don't think he has fantasy value that you need to chase. Like he's a a breakout star or anything like that. I'm getting pretty deep down into the world here. Oh, cool. And so yeah, so I think this isn't like the Chargers are bad, but it's not ideal. We'll have to see. Oh god, that is actually more dangerous than I realized. How many zombies are coming? Okay, are they all? Oh, they're all coming up. Okay, good. You come up. Oh, ouch, ouch. And yeah, we'll have to see how Justin Herbert's injury, if that keeps him out. Yeah, obviously that holds back other pass catchers if he's out. I'm looking at. Oops, excuse me. I missed that one. I'm also looking at Cameron Dicker, the kicker. I think he is a legitimately good fantasy kicker going forward. I don't know if I'd rather have Boswell. I guess I'd rather have Boswell. He did miss a 60-yarder. He missed pretty badly. I don't know if it was a 60-yarder, but it was a long-ass kick. But the fact that they even gave him, a long-ass kick to try, it tells you everything you need to know. I don't think they're going to lose trust in him or anything like that. So yeah, Cameron Dicker, Chris Boswell, probably the best players to have on these teams. I mean, moving on, I guess next up we got to talk about the Seahawks and the Dolphins. So this is a Seahawks team that's also undefeated. If you're a Seahawks fan, you can just feel good about the fact that they seem like they're putting the pieces together. They're not instant all-stars, but they obviously got the win, so they did something right. And they're just, as a team, I think, really starting to gel. Geno Smith looked a lot better this game. He's somebody who I think has value going forward. If he's out there on your waivers, you might want to try to pick him up as as like a quarterback that you just play on a regular basis, or you may see him more as a streamer. But either way, I think he's looking more accurate. They're putting things together. Obviously, I think that the receivers, Metcalf is the most valuable. Nothing changes there. Lockett had more work than Jackson Smith and Jigba this game, so who's the second and third best receiver to have on that team, I think, is still an open question. I think both those guys can have some value for your team, but all three are probably going to end up like in the top 50 or something of wide receivers, but that doesn't necessarily mean you actually want them on your team because they're hard to predict which one's going to start, or which one's going to have a big week. I mean, that is a problem. This is real danger. Okay, now I have to make a new shield and eat food. Wow, another half heart, barely survived moment. I should have a sponsor and be like, another just barely didn't die moment brought to you by, and then insert the name of the sponsor and have a little, 20% off with the code this fucking fantasy football show, except I'd have a better code because it wouldn't be that whole name of the show because that's too long. But you get the idea. I got to learn to integrate advertising. That's the modern way to success, I believe, in this world. What was I saying? Yeah, the Seahawks receivers, obviously Metcalf. I still think probably Metcalf, JSN, and then Lockett third in terms of overall value. I don't know. I think it's just because JSN gets more opportunities for explosive types of plays. But Lockett had 8 targets in this game, and JSN had 5 or less. Not as many. But, just keep that in mind, too. And then Zach Charbonnet, he's somebody that I think is going to, be valuable for your fantasy team at times, but only times where Kenneth Walker is sitting. He did show more this game. He did have some good bounce on some plays. He bounced outside of defenders and stuff. So it wasn't like he was just a guy. I mean, I still think he's just a guy in the grand scheme of things, but he earned some of his fantasy points in this game by actually performing in a way that is conducive to scoring fantasy points with talent. So nothing against him. I see him as somebody whose value is entirely contingent on Kenneth Walker's value, or on Kenneth Walker being, out or, injured in this case. But yeah, Charbonnet in the short term, perfectly decent. This is a massive cave system. I'm not even scratching the surface. Every time I go around a new corner, there's more unmarked or unlit up parts of this giant freaking cave, and very few diamonds in this area, at least, which is sad because I was hoping for more. But yeah, the Seahawks defense I think is legit, also, which is a good thing, I guess, for if you have their defense. I think you can play them. I don't know if you're going to play them every week. I don't know if they're that legit, but they seem, generally speaking, legit, and maybe they're too legit to quit. which is, I'm going to start saying that from now on if I remember to. When a defense is like legit, it's like the Vikings. It's like, oh man, I had the Vikings week 1 against the Giants and they did pretty good, but they're not legit. They're not too legit to quit. Or what am I trying to say? Did I say that backwards? Basically, you'd be like, oh, they're playing the 49ers week 2. I'm going to quit them. And then the response is like, no, the Vikings are too legit to quit. Meaning you should not quit them. Oh, fuck, I still don't have a shield. I forgot all about that. There it is, shield. Beautiful. Okay. Now I can move on with my life. But yeah, what was I saying? I don't know. The Seahawks are fine. The Dolphins, yeah, I mean, you just gotta hope that they get another good quarterback at some point, probably from free agency, from trading. I mean, or just picking up somebody who ends up being good. Okay, hi. Achan's going to be okay. Oh, hey, more diamonds here. Sweet. Achan is going to be sustainable, but he's still lost value compared to, when Tua's there, obviously. Oh, another diamond. Okay, good. Good. Just more enemies to deal with first. So, yeah, you can feel good, I think, about Achan even under these circumstances. You don't feel great about it because it's still not as valuable as he was under with this team with Tua. And who knows how long, if Tua's back this season at all, who knows how long it'll be. But overall, I'm kind of, obviously you're down on all these guys, but I'm feeling like Achan is the one who's still going to get, still going to get a gazillion targets. And, in the passing game as well as in the run game, he's just a huge part of this team. Uh-oh, that's not good. Buy low on the wide receivers if you want to, specifically because they might get a better quarterback at some point, and at that point they're going to have more value. But it's not looking great. You might be able to find somebody who will trade away those guys thinking that this is the end of their season. Ultimately, that basically, assuming Tua doesn't come back, that they're toast, they're cooked, so to speak. And that might be the actual case, but it's certainly something that you can. Oh wait, where'd that guy go? Certainly something that you can, oh God, this is super dangerous. Oh God, hello. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not in love with any of the pass catchers in that offense for obvious reasons, but you go for it if you think that you can gain some value there. I don't know that they're going to have a lot of value. The hope is that they get another quarterback who really can do it for them. But there's no guarantee or even, an expectation unless they really decide this is a year to go all in on a trade, or unless, they get news that Tua is officially not coming back. That might be something that changes the calculus for the team and makes them invest, a little more immediately in this team's immediate, quarterback needs. But yeah, it's a bummer overall. There's not much else to say about that offense, I don't think. The Eagles and the Saints are next. This is another game where it didn't quite go how people thought. You had a team that looked like a dominant contender at 2-0 in the Saints and came back down to earth a little bit in this game. It happens a lot in the NFL. It's just the nature of this league that, you have teams that disappoint after showing great potential. And that's what we saw from from the Saints team, rather. I don't think they're going to be bad this year, but I think we saw that they're not, they're not going to just instantly dominate the league. Clint Kubiak is undoubtedly a good offensive coordinator and does good things, but that doesn't mean that they're just going to be able to week after week, run over other teams the way that they did over the Cowboys this past week, or week 2. I mean, and so yeah, I guess we'll start with the Saints. So my sense is don't panic on these guys. It's definitely a buy low or trade value for Rashid Shaheed. He put up a big 0 in fantasy, but that does not mean that he is a 0 going forward in fantasy. In my opinion, I think he's somebody who's going to have weekly. Oh, that really doesn't. Okay, he's somebody who's going to have weekly value for your fantasy team. I think he got like 5 targets in this game. It's not like he fell off or something. Boop, boopity boo. Shaheed, don't panic, buy low. Chris Olave, he's looking more like what you hoped, which is a legit wide receiver one for a team, he's going to get that kind of volume. He's going to be in the situation to really thrive, I think. So all good. Oh, hello. You have an actual sword too, no less. Hello. What's your deal? You want some of this? You can't swing that sword because you're not smart enough to. Yeah, Shaheed is the wide receiver 2 for this team for real, I think, is the takeaway here. And Olave is the wide receiver 1 for real and will have value as a wide receiver 1 for real this season. I think those are ultimately the real takeaways here, in my opinion. Let's light up a little bit more of this before I go back for those diamonds. I don't want to get in too many fights, but I also don't want stuff spawning while I'm gathering things. Derek Carr, I don't know. He's probably a streamable guy. He's probably like somebody you can stream on a regular basis or a semi-regular basis at least. But he's not somebody I'd want to hold and start every week. That's for sure. I think Geno, for example, Geno Smith is a better weekly start at this point. So yeah, I don't know. Derek Carr is stock down from the this past couple weeks where it looked like he was unbeatable. And oh, hello, another zombie. Blake Groupie, the kicker who I probably should have picked over Chase McLaughlin this past week. Also somebody I think if he's on your waivers as a kicker, he's a good kicker to have. So don't sleep on Blake Groupie. And yeah, don't panic overall about this Saints team, in my opinion. Moving on to the Eagles, who, put a hurting on the Saints. They did a pretty darn good job against the Saints, put a hurting on them. They controlled this game throughout, as far as what I'm reading and understanding. It was not a situation where it was like a big back and forth game. It was like this is a game that the Eagles were in control for the vast majority of this game. And they didn't score a lot of points, but they kept the game. They were in control of the game. Oh, hello. There you are. Yeah, come on up here. Bring it. Gotcha. And so, yeah, this is stock up in general. That's dangerous up above there. Stock up in general on the Eagles here. Jalen Hurts, I feel like he's a shadow. He does the shadow of what Lamar Jackson does in the sense that, what am I trying to say? He's maybe trying to do too much, but like unlike Lamar Jackson, who when he tries to do too much, it's like awesome. I think Jalen Hurts is fine, but he's no Lamar Jackson when it comes to like putting the team on his back and trying to play hero ball. I think it can hurt the team if he tries to play hero ball. He'll have turnovers potentially, but oh wow, okay, what is this? A whole new cavern, eh? Come back for that. But I think he's fine. I just I'll note that he may be a little more turnover prone because of that. Devontae Smith left this game with a concussion. AJ Brown's already out. This team has a week 5 bye week. I would guess that none of these pass catchers are coming back, or at least neither of those guys are coming back until after the bye. So maybe Jahan Dotson has this immediate spot start value for your team. I don't know. I'm not in love with that. Dallas Goedert certainly has stock up value up while these guys are out, as you saw in this game when he had 10 catches. A big game for Dallas Goedert in this one. And I do think, until those pass catchers, the two main wide receivers are back, he is going to be the probably most valuable asset. But yeah, consider Jahan Dotson. But I think Goddard has at least one more big game. And then again, you have their bye week coming up. So I would not plan on seeing either both Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown back until after the bye week. Probably. I don't know enough to, make a strong prediction. I don't know how these teams operate or what the status of these guys' injuries are. But yeah, and Saquon Barkley on a tier up at the very top of the running back heap. Maybe Jonathan Taylor is there. I think at this point it's looking like it's the same tier that Brees and Bijan are on. That's where Saquon Barkley is right now. He's one of the best backs in fantasy football, and looking like for the foreseeable future, he will have one of the best scoring seasons for anybody in fantasy football. He's why is my sword not hitting you? Yeah, he's looking good. Things are looking up for Saquon for the Eagles. Nice. But yeah, the Eagles are looking like they're still a contender, and I'm happy, or you're happy if you have them on your fantasy team. I think across the board with those guys I just mentioned. Even I don't know how long the injuries will keep AJ Brown and Devontae Smith out, but presuming the injuries don't keep them out for terribly long, you're looking at players that you're really happy to have on your team, on a team that I think is going to put up points consistently and have a generally good fantasy season. So that's all coming up Millhouse or whatever. But moving on, we got a couple more games to cover. The Rams and the 49ers. Wow. Well, this was a surprise in the final score. It looked like the 49ers had control of this game for the most part, for much of the game. That's probably the way out. And that, despite having control for much of the game over a very depleted Rams team, the 49ers still managed to find a way to lose the game, or rather the Rams managed to find a way to win the game. I'll start with the Rams here. I think this team maybe saved its season by getting a win here and not going 0-3. Now we just wait for those other receivers to come back and to really see what we have with this team. But, I think that they really, this was a big win for the team just based on being a competitive team this season. I think Matthew Stafford proved that he is a really, really good football player who can get it done under almost any circumstances. I mean, that's pretty amazing, to come back and win this game in that circumstances with the receivers he had. Definitely is impressive. Kyron Williams might be in that same tier as Barkley and Jonathan Taylor, alongside Brees and Bijan. I don't know if that might be taking it a little too far to say that he's, in the same tier as those guys, but Kyron Blake Corum, I think he had 0 touches. I don't know if he even had any snaps, but it looks like he's not a thing. Ronnie Rivers is the running back who, played a few snaps, had a couple touches, but Kyron Williams was everything to this team and is everything to this team. It seems like this could be a season where he truly is one of those workhorse backs yet again. So you're probably feeling good about that for sure. Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay, I would argue, raised the floor of everyone on this team, just by being as good as they are. Stafford being as good as he is, as a player, and McVay being as good as he is as a play caller. As for the receivers, until we get Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp back, Demarcus Robinson, it does feel like is the guy, is legitimately, the number one receiver on this team. I don't know that he has insane value, but he has some value. Colby Parkinson, probably still worth a look. The thing is, I think Matthew Stafford's spreading it around to pretty much everybody. Tyler Johnson feels like a desperation flex or like a DFS play. Tutu Atwell's kind of the same, super risky, but might have a big week. Might be involved in a couple of creative plays. Joshua Carty, their kicker, also missed a long, I think 50-plus field goal. So did Jake Moody on the 49ers side. But I think Carty might be a good value as a kicker, especially if the Rams are temporarily, touchdown deficient, basically. On to the 49ers. Good game for Brock Purdy. He had actually a really good fantasy day in addition to just, clearly showing that, he can keep this team in games. He's been this way. It's not like he needed to show us this for the first time. But decent game for him. I think he's a solid start when he goes against bad passing defenses, which is probably how you would characterize this Rams team, particularly with their injuries. Jawan Jennings, man, he's obviously the story here too. Jawan Jennings, I believed in coming into this game. I think he legitimately is, he's a wide receiver too on this team while Deebo Samuel's out. And, I think he showed it in this game. Like, he has the skills. It's not just like he's just a fill-in who can't really do much. So, yeah, until Deebo's back, I think he continues to be a good start. Not a 40-something point scorer start, but a good, solid player for your team is Jawan Jennings. And, yeah, Brandon Ayuk will get better, I think. He's fine. I'm not worried. He's not going to have as good a season as last year. It's kind of, that's been my sense of it. And, nothing here changes that. Yeah, Jordan Mason's still awesome and will continue to be awesome. No changes there. I don't know. I still think this is going to be Ayuk, Debo, and whoever the running back is. So nothing really changes there, and you don't need to worry if you have those guys on your team. You just have to wait at this point for Debo and McCaffrey, of course. And yeah, that's it for that game. The last game of the week that we're going to cover as I find my way all the way out of this cave, I think Buffalo Bills and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Actually not even another. Probably the biggest blowout game of the week. This was a game where the Buffalo Bills just dominated the Jacksonville Jaguars, proved that their undefeated record is not a fluke and that they are a legit contender, and and just did their thing. Looking as strong as ever this year. Josh Allen, James Cook, fantasy all-stars. Maybe James Cook is in that same tier with those other backs that I mentioned, Kyren and Saquon Barkley. Like maybe James Cook is right up in that same tier. He's definitely a fantasy star, as is his quarterback, Josh Allen. And then it looks like Khalil Shakir is legitimately the wide receiver one for this team. That's not something you can really deny at this point. Did I go the wrong way? Yeah, he had by far the most volume. Curtis Samuel had a few catches. A couple other guys had a catch. Keon Coleman only had one catch. It was a touchdown, but it was still very much looking like this is Khalil Shakir is the wide receiver one for this team. So yeah, if you got him, if for whatever reason in your super shallow league he's actually still on waivers, which he shouldn't be. What else about this Bills team? I mean, that's really all you need to know is that Shakir, Cook, Allen. As for the Jaguars, I don't know. The biggest thing here, the biggest takeaway is Christian Kirk is back. He showed up. He did what we kind of thought he was going to do all season, which is have a bunch of targets and be the number one receiver for this team. This has got to be stocked down at least a little for Brian Thomas Jr. just because, the last few weeks it was looking like, Christian Kirk was an afterthought here and that it was going to be, a situation where Brian Thomas was probably, oh, hello, spiders. You want some of this? But yeah, Christian Kirk had a big game. He seems like he is the legit number one option in this offense. I mean, I don't want to overreact to this, but all of our excitement about Brian Thomas Jr. is definitely at least slightly mitigated by the results of this game, I think. And, that's just, it is what it is. That's how these kind of things go. You have a player that you think is, oh man, there's skeletons everywhere. You have a player who you think is going to, be a star, and then Christian Kirk seemed to have disappeared, but now he's back. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say about that. Hopefully these Iron Golems are helping keep the village safe. I like that. Thank you, Iron Golems. You guys are helping protect all my friends here. I'm just going to take a nap in this little bed here. What else to say about the Jags? I don't know. I mean, I'm not out completely on this offense. ETN did good under the circumstances. Brenton Strange, I almost started Brenton Strange over Gesicki, who, I was like, pick one up for the, for the week on the waivers. And I almost went Brenton Strange over Gesicki. I wish I had because he had a better game than Gesicki. Although Gesicki did something, it wasn't an absolute donut. It wasn't great either. This Jags team, I don't know. I wouldn't overreact to this loss. They're not a great team. They'll probably get a little bit better, but they might still kind of suck for, the foreseeable future. That's about all I have to say for the Jaguars. I'm sure more could be said, but I don't think it's a necessity to say more. So that's all the games of the week. We will move on to the waivers segment next. Wizards of Waiver Replacement, where we make moves that make us look like wizards of using the waivers to replace players and make our team good. Looking at our waivers for this week, I'm not good. Just by the way, I usually play in shallow leagues, and this content's intended for more casual players, so I'm not going to restrict myself to only players that are less than 50% rostered. I'm just going to talk about players that I see in my leagues that are available, talk about some that might have been dropped, etc. So if you're looking for only players that are under 50% rostered, then, read every other waiver column that exists, because there's a ton of them. But I'm just going to talk about players that maybe aren't quite that, but, either way, they have some value. Starting with the running back position, I think Bucky Irving is probably a top choice on the waivers. Why do you still have your job? Yeah, I feel like Bucky Irving is in a role. His role's growing, and he's in a position to potentially really hold value for you throughout the season. So he'd be a top priority for me. A bit shorter term, but you're looking at Chuba Hubbard, Carson Steele, if no one picked him up last week. I think Braylon Allen is an elite, an elite second running back on that Jets team. So if he wasn't picked up, he would be a top choice of mine. Toolsmith, okay. There's a lot of players you could look at. Maybe Madison. I mean, I don't love Zamir White like I talked about in that segment, but maybe Madison, because this team will be playing from behind. You got Rico Dowdle potentially out there. You got Justice Hill as an option. Jaleel McLaughlin, and maybe even someone dropped Javonte Williams, so you could go with either of those guys if you want to. Emmanuel Wilson from the Packers. I don't know that he's going to, usurp Josh Jacobs' role in any significant way, but he's worth a consideration there. You also, Roshan Johnson on the Bears, technically was the leading rusher for the Bears in this past game. If this team continues to get better, if the Bears continue to get better, he may have some more value going forward. At the wide receiver position, you got Quentin Johnston, I think is definitely a candidate to have value all season. You got Wan'Dale Robinson, especially in PPR. Juwan Jennings for short-term help if he's still out there and he didn't get picked up this past week. Definitely look for players that got dropped. Deontay Johnson got dropped in some leagues by short-sighted managers. Christian Kirk might have been dropped by somebody. I mean, there's definitely some options that are probably out there. Players that are probably on the waivers in most places still. Darnell Mooney is definitely, I think, a top choice. DeAndre Hopkins is on a lot of waivers. Those would both be good pickups. You could look at Jalen Naylor, a little bit more short-term. Also short-term, you could look at another Eagles receiver if you expect, like I do, Devontae Smith and or A.J. Brown to miss another week. Keep in mind they do have a Week 5 bye week. The Eagles do. You might look at Michael Wilson for the Cardinals, and there might be someone like Tyler Lockett still out there, also as a player who was either dropped or never drafted. So there's definitely some good options out there, probably on the waivers this week. Tight end. I feel that the big one this week, and probably a lot of people would agree, is Tyler Conklin. He really looked in that Jets game like he might have a consistent and valuable role in that offense. It remains to be seen whether he can do it week in and week out, obviously, but he'd be my top pickup. I think Cole Kmet, who also had a really big game, I think I said this in the earlier segment, I believe that's a bit more of a mirage, that I don't think he's going to be a long-term value or a weekly consistent value for that Bears team. I think this was more of a fluky, big scoring game, but I could be wrong about that. And so, he's definitely worth a consideration. He's definitely a talented player, and it may be that he has a role going forward kind of, that's bigger. And like I said in the segment about the Bears, I really do think that they may decide that their best approach to winning games is to let Caleb Williams air it out 40 times a game. And if that's the case, then Cole Kmet may have value, may have enough volume to maintain value. I like Zach Ertz a lot too. I mentioned him in that in the respective team segment for the Commanders. Definitely would be looking at him as a top priority. Those would be, for me, Kmet would be third, or maybe third out of the probable tight ends on the waivers behind both Conklin and Zach Ertz. You can look at Brenton Strange. as a player who has a meaningful role for that Jaguars team. And you can look at, Mike Gesicki, Jonnu Smith, other players who may have just a role and do something for your team. I don't think either of those are bad pickups. Look out for players that might have been dropped or never drafted early in the season. Pat Freiermuth is a good example of that. If you're looking to hold or if you have at least a bench spot to hold a tight end that you maybe can't start this week, but that will have value throughout the season, players like David Njoku and Evan Engram got dropped in a lot of shallow leagues, so those might be players you can grab as your second tight end. They may not be ready to go this week, but they may have good value as the season progresses. So those are some players at the tight end position to consider. Moving on to quarterback, Geno Smith would probably be my top of the week. That's an awkward spot. I think maybe Justin Fields, just based on having a decent matchup this week, would be a good streamer. Sam Darnold or Aaron Rodgers, however, it should be noted that both have tougher matchups this week, tough-ish at least matchups this week. And I would consider going back to Caleb Williams at this point. There's a good chance he was dropped by someone in your league already, and what he showed this past week, plus the fact that he's going up against a Rams team that is not particularly strong defensively at the moment, those would be reasons I would look at Caleb Williams as somebody who, may just have a decent game this week as a streamer, but, is also maybe a season-long hold as he continues to improve. So, yeah, I would definitely have that in mind. If you really want to go for, like, a matchup-based streamer, you might try Deshaun Watson, although, obviously, he showed issues as a passer that, that make you pause. Anyway, so at the kicker position, one of my favorite positions to stream in general and to try to find good kickers, I'm going to go ahead and say that, one of your best options here is the Saints, Blake Groupie, Feather Falling 4. That's not bad. Groupie is probably in the same category with Boswell, with Cameron Dicker, the neighborhood kicker. There's a whole tier, and McLaughlin I think is still there, even though he really let you down this past week. Kickers on middling teams that have a powerful leg. Ooh, Power 5. I think I got to roll with that one, actually. That's pretty good. Yeah, I think you could look at a number of kickers. There's also some good rookie kickers out there. Will Reichard, number 1 in my heart, and number 1 in Captain Picard's heart, I guess, also is an option. Joshua Carty on the Rams. Let's see, who else? Jake Bates. You could go Cairo Santos or Austin Seibert if you want to be kind of cool and tricky. Let's see, who else? I think that's it for kickers. That's more than enough. There's probably kickers on your waivers. I think Boswell is probably a top target. I think Dicker is probably a good value. And some of those rookies, are on good, productive offenses. So definitely got some options there. And then last but not least, the Kansas City Chiefs. If their defense is out on your waivers, that would be my top target for this week. Not because their matchup this week it is good. It's the Chargers, maybe without Justin Herbert. They just seem like they might be a season-long hold, and obviously, if they're out on your waivers this week, they're going to be more desired, and people are going to probably be keyed in just because they have the good matchup. That would be my top waiver kind of goal, but, there's not plenty, but there's a few good streamers this week. Interestingly, I looked at this. A lot of teams seem to have a good Week 4 matchup, but a bad Week 5 matchup, or vice versa. They have a bad Week 4 matchup, but a good Week 5 matchup. So the Bears, if they're available, obviously the Texans, if they're available, certainly they might be a team that someone dropped or whatever, but that I think will have definite value, for the rest of the season. What else? Who else? Check for the Vikings, just in case. Streaming-wise, Titans play the Dolphins. I think you could probably try either of those defenses under the circumstances to be, a fantasy spot start for you. Lock it in, buddy. Yeah, I don't know. I think that in terms of streaming, this is a tough week because of that whole thing about week 4 and week 5. There's defenses that have good matchups one week, but bad matchups the next week. But I think that's, that's generally Titans Dolphins is probably, one of the best just pure streaming. Why won't these guys lose their jobs? What do I have to do? Anyway, I think that's going to do it for today. Thank you so much for watching, listening. Please like and subscribe like everybody says to do on all the YouTube videos. Do the same for this YouTube video. And if you have feedback, if you have thoughts, if you have comments, players I missed on the waivers, takes on the game that you disagree with, or just things that you want to say that are, non-toxic things that you want to say, please do comment on the video. I'd love to hear from people and know if you're even watching this, even if you just watched a certain section or, came here for some other reason, how you got here, any of that stuff. So, please comment and be a part of that community. Share some feedback with me. I'd appreciate it. Hope you all have a great day, week, year, life. I will see you next time. Bye-bye. Cameron Dicker, the neighborhood kicker. What you want to do is pick up a field goal. That is our real goal. 50-plus yards, kick it hard like a steel toe. Yeah, it's that. What do you know about that?